Well, not what you would want to see. We are about to go live over on Bleacher Report too, so apologize for the initial delay. All right. So Alabama, Georgia 2, this time in the SEC championship game, this time not the result that Alabama needed or wanted. We're going to talk about this because there's going to be a lot of conversations around what this means for Alabama as they look to enter the college football playoffs. I think that's an interesting conversation, one that I think more fans are having because, well, that's what happens whenever you expand it. And we have a committee that I just don't trust to do the right thing, irregardless of what happens with Alabama. And I think that all of the hesitancy with the committee would show it. But for Alabama, this was not what you needed. I know there are going to be some people who think that Alabama will be in the college football playoffs regardless of what happened tonight. There are others that don't think Alabama will be in. I think if you were Alabama, if you were going to lose this game, it had to be competitive. And quite frankly, this game wasn't that competitive. Listen, Alabama's defense did pretty good. Georgia got 14 of those points. Actually, I'm sorry, Georgia got 28 of those points off of a short field, special teams play, and the interception. That's football, right? Good on Georgia for being able to capitalize on those plays. But Alabama's defense once again showed up, played well, and really played well enough for Alabama to be able to have a competitive game. Alabama's offense, as they have been really since October, has just not been that same unit. And we've had this conversation so many times where we'll talk about Alabama's offense. And I think there are several factors. I think that Alabama's offense has regressed. I have also given you my take on why I think Alabama's offense has regressed. I think Alabama's offense has regressed because early in the year, you just don't have a lot of film on a team. And as the year starts to progress, as more film becomes available, you can't hide who you are. And Alabama's offense is incredibly one dimensional. And even when I say one dimensional, Alabama's offense is really half dimensional. And the reason why I say half, Alabama can't hit deep vertical shots. And even when the ball is thrown well on those vertical routes, Alabama hasn't been able to catch them. So your vertical passing game has just not been there. And we talked about this after last week's game at length. We've actually had this exact conversation for multiple weeks now. That whenever you don't have a running game, whenever you don't have a vertical passing game, and teams know, hey, they're really good at the intermediate passing game, it's easier to take it away because, yes, you're one dimensional from the standpoint of you can only throw the ball, but you don't even have the entirety of the field when you're throwing the ball. You only have about 25 yards out and in. And Georgia was able to key in on that, like Oklahoma was able to key in on it, like Auburn was able to key in on it, like LSU was able to key in on it, like South Carolina was able to key in on it. That's not new. We've had this conversation several times. That is just been kind of the reality of this Alabama offense. So saying Ty played scared, which was understandable due to the pressure. Yeah, Georgia heated him up as well as any team has. I mean, it is what it is. Georgia did a very good job. JBO1981 says, why won't Kalen put in another quarterback like Saban did? I've seen this take a lot. I really don't have an answer for you other than the fact of, I think if you're Kalen DeBoer, you're thinking like, hey, as long as we can still make it into the playoffs, I don't want to completely rattle the confidence of my quarterback. Because here's the thing, if you pull Ty and you put in Austin Mack or Keelan Russell and it doesn't get better, like if the issues are still there, which by the way, if you pull Ty and you put in one of those guys, you still can't run the football. Right? You still can't run the football. Now you have guys who are very inexperienced playing Kirby. And that's tough, right? Like, I think Austin Mack is a supremely talented quarterback. I think Keelan Russell's the future. But we're not talking about a defense that is Missouri, and Missouri has a good defense. And I know you're already thinking, well, Saban did it against Georgia. That offense was also more complete. That offense was more complete and allowed for Saban to do some different things. But I just think that if you pull Ty Simpson and it's not better, it could actually get worse for Ty because then he has no confidence. So listen, I don't think that anybody's wrong for asking that question. I think it's a legitimate conversation to be had, but I do think that's the other side of the coin. Bama 1224 says, but you have a better shot getting the ball to receivers. Austin Mack is 6'6". You might. Like I said, I'm not saying that this is a conversation that's completely illogical or that anybody's wrong for thinking this, but there is a different side of the coin, being that if it doesn't work, now you have hurt your starting quarterback's confidence worse than it's already hurt. And that could be a slippery slope. So that's just unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, it's a definite conversation. Matt says, isn't it a 12-team playoff? It is, Matt, over on YouTube. Offensive creativity has also dipped, says Doc Moe over on Bleacher Report. We didn't see much creativity out the offense up until the later portion of the game, and by that point, it was all she wrote. You're right. There wasn't this creative offense that we've seen all year from Alabama, where we've seen sequences from Alabama this year where it's very, very creative. Very creative. Killjoy says, crazy thing is Bama will still get in even with this terrible outing. This is the hard part about it, Killjoy, because here's the hard position you're in. I'm interested in seeing what the committee does, because if Alabama, let's pretend Alabama didn't make it to the SEC championship game. Let's pretend that it was A&M versus Georgia. Alabama would have been into the playoffs. Like, they would have been a lock to go to the playoffs. And now it's just, I'm fascinated to see what happens whenever you have a team like an Alabama that, had they not gone to the SEC championship game, would have been a lock to the playoff. Do you penalize a team that would be in that position for playing an extra game against a top 10 opponent, top 5 opponent in Alabama's case? That's what's going to be a fascinating conversation, and I don't have the answer. But if we're trying to be as objective as possible, that's the conversation. And I don't have the answer to that. But that is the conversation. Because if Alabama didn't show up, if it was A&M Georgia, Alabama would have been going to the playoffs anyways. They would have been a lock. They had to play another game against Georgia, a top 5 team. How much are they going to be penalized for having to play another game while other teams that were also 10-2 didn't have to play that extra game? I don't know. But that is the actual conversation. And I don't have the answer. I don't know what the committee will do, but it is a genuine argument to be had. Hurricane says they haven't had a run game for 2 years. It has been a while. It has been a while. The PG show over on YouTube says Alabama is out. I don't know that they are. Duck over on Bleacher Report says Bama wasn't a lock before. They absolutely were a lock before. Like, objectively speaking, Duck, Alabama was absolutely a lock before this game. If like I said, if in the scenario that A&M would have been playing in Atlanta against Georgia instead of Alabama, Alabama 100% would have been a lock to the college football playoff. That isn't a debatable point. That's just a fact. And I get what you're saying. They still questionable only beating Auburn by 7 in the final seconds. That's a rivalry game. That isn't the point I think you would be trying to make. But it is not a debate. It is an objective fact that had Alabama not played today, they would have been a lock. You can say that they wouldn't have, but the odds and all of the actual data points to something else. So that's actually that. Chris over on YouTube says it's because we pick a head coach that hasn't figured it out yet. I don't think that that's necessarily true, Chris. I just think that we talked about this a few weeks ago. Alabama is still a hodgepodge on offense in terms of what Kalen DeBoer wants to do. They don't have as much of the personnel that fits the scheme they want to run on offense as they do on defense to run the schemes they want to run. Yes, it is a football game, Duck. Astute observation. Oh, Georgia, Metalhead over on YouTube saying stop making excuses. Nobody's making excuses. Nobody's making excuses. Nobody has said that Alabama didn't deserve to lose that game or that Georgia wasn't the better team. They absolutely were. I'm not sure what excuses have been made. I mean, it is what it is. Georgia was 100% better today. They were better prepared. Had an excellent game plan. Bama's defense was about the only positive thing. So, it is what it is. But Georgia was absolutely the better prepared team. So, that's all it is to it. Killjoy says O-line is soft. Let that coach go and find one that'll make them more aggressive. I don't know about that, Killjoy, because like I keep saying, the offense is just this amalgamation at this point. Grubb, Coach Cap, they want people to get out in space. And Danny Dimes saying, when's the last time Bama beat Oklahoma? Had it ever happened? You must be a new football fan, Danny Dimes, because they did it in the playoff games. Oklahoma won the last 2 outings. It's Oklahoma. They're a fantastic football team, but Bama beat Oklahoma in the playoffs. So it absolutely has happened. Yeah, Greg, I think that this is very simple. I think that this is very, very simple. Bama is half-dimensional on offense. So they can be as prepared as they can be. But if you're only half dimensional, that's going to happen. Yeah, Danny, your offense isn't great, but I mean, the defense is fantastic. Right? Like, even this last game, Bama OU, like, Bama's offense did really well, but Oklahoma's defense made plays when it mattered. And that's all there is to it. Bama's receivers don't suck, Danny Dimes. There's, like I said, they're only half dimensional. It's very easy for a defense right now to key in on what Alabama wants to do. Like, this is not a difficult conversation to have, right? Bama has a great wide receiver room. Lottie Brooks is fantastic. Ryan Williams has had drops this year. He's still very talented. Jeremy Bernard, very talented. Rico Scott's a young, exciting player. Derek Meadows, very excited about him. Isaiah Horton has been fantastic. But yeah, that's what happens. It has nothing to do with the wide receivers. And Danny Dimes, I promise you, as someone who watches all college football, Danny Dimes on YouTube says Georgia defense isn't even that awesome anymore. As someone who watches all college football, Georgia's defense has been playing much better the back half of the season. Like, it is, I'm not saying it's the 2020 Georgia defense. I'm not even saying they have the best defense in the SEC. What I am saying is that it's a very, very, very good defense. It is. And they are very well coached. Right? Like, Kirby is Kirby. Kirby is the preeminent coach in college football. He's going to have his guys looking good and getting better. And that's what we've seen with Georgia this year. Georgia's defense has gotten much better, though. They have notoriously gotten much better through the season. Listen, it's Georgia. It's Kirby. They're going to be well coached. They're going to be talented. And that's what they were tonight. They were well coached. They were aggressive. They knew Alabama's offensive limitations, something that they didn't know the first time around because it was so early into the season. You don't really know what the offense is for Alabama. And that's the truth. I mean, it's all hats off to Georgia, but we've had this conversation over here for weeks now, really stemming from that South Carolina game. If you have been over here, if you have tuned in, this is the conversation we've been having. Top Dog says D has been mediocre. I completely disagree with that, Top Dog. Alabama's defense is absolutely the shining spot for this team. Alabama's defense is very good. Alabama's offense is not helping their defense. Once again, I'm not sitting here telling you, Top Dog, Alabama has the number one defense in college football. That's not my contention. My contention is that's a defense you can win with. That is absolutely a defense you can win with, but you have got to give them something on offense. Like, something. It's one thing to be one-dimensional when you can only pass the ball, but you can throw it deep. You have the intermediate game. You have the short game, because then teams have to respect the vertical. Teams don't have to respect the verticals for Alabama, because there have been so many times when you go and you look at these games, and this is why I disagree with you, Danny, over on YouTube. This is where I do disagree with you on that Bama's wide receivers aren't good. When I'm watching these games back, and especially on that All-22, there are so many times where Lottie Brooks or Ryan Williams has won on a vertical or on a deep shot or on a post. But that's just the one area from the beginning of the season to now. That's the one area throwing the ball Ty has not been good at all season, is the vertical shots. And when you can't do that, defenses sit in this 25-yard box. And they know you're not going to run the ball. So it is what it is. It is what it is. Hey, Sooner in Texas, good to see you. Good to see you. It is a tough loss, man. It is a tough loss, but that's football. What are you going to do? Yeah, Nicholas Lamar, 100%. Nicholas Lamar over on Bleacher Report says our offense put our defense in so many piss poor situations that it was ridiculous. That's the honest to God truth. Like, the defense was not the issue tonight. Georgia had 21 points off of miscues, which is football. Like, good on. I don't want anybody to think that when I say Georgia had these points off miscues that I'm pointing to, oh, well, that's the only way Georgia succeeded. That's football. Things happen in football, and Georgia was able to capitalize because they're very well coached. But Bama's defense was not the issue. Top Dog, I'd be very interested for you to say why you think that Bama's defense was the issue, because I just don't see it. And I'm definitely open to being wrong, but I just don't see it. Greg over on YouTube says 2 years under KD and the offense has underperformed mightily. The line has to be better, but what else do we need, Ty? Honestly, I think that it is very simple, Greg. I think it is very, very simple. When you look at the personnel Alabama has on offense, they're very talented, but there's a reason why whenever we talk recruiting, whenever we talk transfer portal, the first thing that we talk about is fit. Does the player you're going after fit? And the answer has to be yes. So you can have a great roster, but if they don't fit the scheme, then you have to figure something out. Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, Ryan Grubb have all been trying to pivot and modify their offense based on the personnel they have because they recognize, hey, we've got good players here. So we're trying to modify what we want to do based on the personnel we have. I think it gets very difficult, Greg, whenever we start with the foundation of any football team, and that's the trenches, but we're talking offense, so specifically the offensive line, and you're talking about a unit that under Wolford, under Doug Marrone, the last few years from Saban, like we forget, Alabama's offensive line from about 2022, 2021 to present has not been good. It has not been good at all. In fact, Bama's offensive line the past 2 years has been better than it was the last few years under Saban. And that's because Alabama now has what I think is a more effective scheme up front. I think that Wolford's scheme that he was trying to utilize up front just didn't make much sense in terms of trying to get offensive linemen that are so big. You all know the stat. It was talked about so much that year where Coach Wolford was at Alabama, that Alabama has an offensive line that's bigger than the average NFL offensive line. Well, then you get in Kalen DeBoer in them, and they want their offensive linemen to play in space. They want pinning and pulling. But how can you effectively do that when your offensive line isn't built for that? So that's why for me, it's very hard for me to look at like all of this and say where Alabama is, because right now we're just kind of trying to see them modify what they want to do based off the personnel. And their recruiting wins have been great. Like when you look at the guys they've recruited that they've brought in that fit what they want to do offensively, defensively, those guys are playing fantastic. Michael Carroll. You look at the Washington transfers, Parker Brailsford, Jeremy Bernard, Lottie Brooks we talk about, Caleb Edwards, Marshall Pritchett. When you look at the defensive side, Dejon Lee, Justin Hill, those guys fit what they want to do. Now, luckily, I firmly believe that for Kane Womack, when he got there, the defense fit. Like he had more personnel that fit what he wanted to do immediately than did Kalen DeBoer and them on the offense. And the tough part so that's the super nuanced argument. The tough argument is, hey, if you're Kalen DeBoer, you still have talent. It needs to be better than this. And that's the truth. Top Dog says, I never said they were the issue. Y'all act like they're amazing. I do think Alabama's defense has been better than mediocre. I think they've absolutely been better than mediocre. Like I've given my reasons, but like I said, Top Dog, I'm open to being wrong. Why do you think they've been mediocre? Because when I look at the past several weeks since South Carolina, the defense is the reason why they have been able to succeed. Mark A. Vigil over on YouTube. Good to see you, Mark. Says it looks like Oklahoma broke Ty Simpson. I've seen this take a lot. And Mark, this is, while I understand why people would say it, when I see this take, the only thing I can think is people haven't been watching Bama's offense. This has been something since South Carolina. Like, we've been sitting here on this show talking about how Alabama's offense since South Carolina has really struggled. The blueprint was out there well before Alabama played Oklahoma. And that's one of the reasons why Oklahoma's defense, I mean, one, you have Brent Venables. He's always going to have a well-coached unit. He's always going to have those guys prepared. But that's why it's looking like it is, right? Like, the blueprint has been out there since October. Will Alabama lose DeBoer? They shouldn't, Mark. They absolutely shouldn't. Lipsley, will Alabama lose any recruits? No, I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Listen, year 2 in Kalen DeBoer, you have the greatest coach of our lifetime in college football. I think the greatest coach ever in college football retire. You have 30 guys hit the transfer portal. You have a new coach come in, and year 2, that coach makes an SEC championship game. Like, obviously, you would love to win it. I'm hurt that we didn't. But I don't think you're going to lose recruits over this. Year 2, post-Saban, people would have thought Alabama would have been in the dirt. Instead, you just competed for an SEC championship game. So, the secondary is looking confused. The secondary didn't hardly give up any big plays. Like, unless, and I could be misremembering something, but Gunnar Stockton only had 156 yards. Alabama's secondary has been an absolute strong suit. That's been one of the best parts of Alabama's defense. And Alabama, up until this game, they've been getting turnovers, attacking the football. But whenever your offense can't move the football and continuously puts your defense in a bad position, you can only bend but don't break so often. So, yeah, see, Mark, listen, I understand if you're an OU fan thinking that, but the truth of the situation is the MO, the blueprint has been out there since South Carolina. That's the like, I wish it was something, Mark. I would actually feel better if it's like, hey, Alabama got figured out that late into the season. Alabama got figured out in October. I would actually feel better, Mark, if I thought that, like, Alabama only got figured out in November. It actually hurts me more to say that Alabama got figured out in October offensively. They were just able to continuously make plays. Like, Alabama fights. That's the one really good thing about this team, is that they just keep fighting and fighting and fighting. You love to see that. But that's why they've won games. They've won games despite being figured out. And then they've lost games because they've been figured out, right? So that's football. Robert Lane says, sorry, Ty. Hey, it is what it is, man. Like I said, year 2 post-Saban, Alabama made the SEC championship game, had a absolute gauntlet of a schedule. Shouldn't have lost the first game, but that's football. It is what it is. I'm not as disappointed as I think a lot of people think I'm going to be, just because, like I said, If you would have told me 2 years after Alabama lost all those players to the transfer portal, lost Nick Saban, that they would be playing for an SEC championship game, I would certainly want a different result than this. There's no doubt about that, naturally. But there's a lot worse places to be. So it is what it is. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. Overall, Top Dog says overall, not just game. But even then, Top Dog, like, I still don't think that. Like, Bama's secondary has not been mediocre this season. Bama's secondary's been really good this season. I mean, who threw probably for the most? Joey Aguilar threw for 268 yards. Outside of that, yeah, Joey Aguilar, and then even then, that's that veer and shoot offense. You know they're going to try and spread you out and get some yards. That's what they do. No pass rush, no aggression, East Coast says. The Bama is lacking a pass rush. That's the one thing on defense, and I kind of wish they'd let Yanze just hunt the quarterback a bit more than they do. But I will say it has been an absolute treat to watch Yanze Pierre continue to grow as a player and become as well-rounded as he has been. That's been a lot of fun this year. That's been a whole lot of fun this year. Watching Yanze Pierre's growth. I mean, because he's been a key part of this defense. I feel bad for Womack. If I were him, I'd leave. I mean, Womack, yeah, they held their end of the deal, and Alabama's offense has got to be better. Next year is going to be a really interesting year. Like, no matter what happens for the playoffs, no matter what happens moving forward, next year is going to be very interesting because you're going to have a lot more of the current recruits that were recruited for this scheme. And then that's going to give us a real look into where this offense is. You're still kind of at that experimentation phase. I think Brooks Austin did a fantastic video about this a few weeks ago, where he was even talking about like basically this same thing. That's like, Bama has great players. That's not the issue, but it's just the scheme versus personnel is kind of all over the place right now. And I think that's why you see some lulls in this offense, where sometimes it looks great, and then you have these stretches of where it doesn't, because you're already half-dimensional, and you're just trying to kind of figure it out. So, I mean, now the interesting question is what happens with the committee, because I honestly don't know. I have no idea what happens moving forward. But I know if you're Alabama, you absolutely can't wait to get Crowell in this backfield. He's coming off of an incredible state championship performance, and he's a real difference maker. So he's a guy I think that you're very excited to get into this backfield. And you know, Bama couldn't run the ball even when they had Jam Miller and Kevin Riley very well. Now you take out those two guys, and it's just real tough. When you look at this, though, it is absolutely pathetic, the rushing yards for Alabama. And what makes it even more pathetic to me is it's not like Georgia was in a cover 3. One high safety, one safety in the box to account for the run. That wasn't it at all. They were 2 high safety the majority of this game, and you still couldn't run the football. That to me was really, really concerning. Sooner in Texas says it could be Bama versus OU at the Palace. I I actually think that Alabama, if they make it, Sooner in Texas will drop further, and it won't be Alabama versus Oklahoma. I think Alabama's going to have a lower seeded game if they make it, personally. John Kirkland over on Bleacher Report says Alabama does not make adjustments. Not the ones I would like, but also, man, like I continue to say, I just don't know what you can do if you're an offensive coach. Because you can't manufacture the run. You don't have a deep ball. You're just known at this point. Like, your MO is known. And there's a lot of film on it. I Beat over on YouTube says Alabama is out. They could be. I Beat. Here's the interesting crossroads the committee is at, I Beat. And let's all be as objective in this as possible. Alabama has a very bad loss to Florida State. They lost in the SEC championship game, and then they lost to another playoff team. So 2 of Alabama's losses are to playoff teams. The FSU loss is a terrible loss. But I'm interested to see if the committee would punish a team like Alabama who, had they not played today, had Alabama been home, they would have been in. So what do you do to that situation? What do you do to a team that, had they just been sitting at home, had they had A&M play in their place today? Right? What if it was A&M Georgia? Alabama would have been one of the 12 teams going to the college football playoff. What do you do to those teams? What do you do to the teams that then go to the conference championship when, if they hadn't, they would have been in anyways, and then have to play a top 5 opponent? They're now playing an extra game against one of the top teams in college football. So I don't know what the committee is going to do, but if we are being objective, and that's one thing I really always try and be, then that's the conversation we have to have. If teams at home can't improve, then teams who do play can go backwards. No doubt, no doubt. And nobody's saying that Alabama would go forward. That's not at all the argument, but the objective argument is no team can get hurt by sitting at home. The only teams that can get hurt are the teams who went. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. I will say I beat it. I don't know, when you said refs gave Alabama 7 points and they couldn't even score. I don't know what the refs did to give Bama 7 points. Bama scored. I don't know what the refs did to help them there. They could have used more help from the refs because they couldn't do anything outside that drive, but that wasn't gifted. They got the touchdown, but that was it. Like, you're 100% right. After out of that drive, they couldn't do anything. Nicholas Lamar says the interesting part is, just say we do get into the playoffs. What kind of team are we going to take into the playoffs? At this point, you are who you are. Right? At this point, if you're Alabama, you are who you are. Kirby didn't think it was bogus. I beat it, so. Oh, you mean the one where he dove at his leg? That's textbook. Like, and it's unfortunate, but if you hit a quarterback that low, that's going to get called. That's not the refs bailing you out. Hey, I beat it. Listen, I am on your side. I don't like the rule. I do not like the rule because we've seen it so many times where a guy will almost be blocked into that position where they're blocked, and because of the block, they slip and they end up hitting the quarterback low. I hear you. I don't think it should be a foul, but it is. I don't think the rule should be there, but it is. So I'm halfway with you. I don't like the rule. I would like more nuance around the rule to where if a guy's blocked into your quarterback low like that, then you don't penalize him. But unfortunately, the rule is there. And yeah, so I halfway feel you, but I wouldn't contend that as being gifted rather than a situation that happened. Mark on YouTube asks the ramifications if Bama is left out. I think Sankey rethinks the 9-game conference schedule, and I think he removes the required Power 4. I have no idea, Mark. Like, this is where I say this is so interesting. Because if Alabama was in a position, if Alabama was ranked 12th or 11th or 13th going into this game, then obviously, yeah, you lose this game, you're out because you weren't a lock for the playoffs before you played, right? Like there were situations that could happen that could knock you out of the playoffs. But for Alabama to have been a lock, obviously, if you're Alabama, if you were going to lose, you didn't want to lose in this fashion. That, to me, is the real argument here, is like, how do they value this loss? Like, how do they look at it? And I don't have the answer to that. But to your point, Mark, if you're Sankey and you're sitting there and you're looking at a team, let's flip the script, right? Let's talk like if it was Oklahoma, right? Oklahoma ends up making it to the SEC championship game, but had they not made it, they're in the college football playoffs anyways. They play, they lose. It's really tough to drop a team in that situation that had they sat at home would have been in. Once again, understand, I'm not saying I think that that's what will happen, but this is the uncomfortable position the playoff committee is in. And if you're Greg Sankey, you're not going to be happy, right? Like, that's the reality of that situation. You're not going to be happy. Let it be known for everybody in here, I didn't think they should move past a 4-team playoff. And Mark, I know you have been watching my content for long enough. You'll know that I did not want them to move past a 4-team playoff. Because in my opinion, if you have a 4-team playoff, you avoid all of this mess. You avoid it. So, it very well, IB, thank you for the $4.99 saying committee was panicking between Notre Dame and Miami. Alabama gave them a miracle out today. Both of these teams now get in and Alabama goes home. Facts. It could be. Like, you could be right. But like I said, if we're being as objective as possible, there is a very interesting conversation to be had here. You could be right. Who knows? Headless Ace says, from a Sooner fan, Bama fans, I know every loss hurts, especially a conference championship game, but maybe this season spurs the competitive spirit in the players and coaches to do something special down the road. Keep the heads up. Headless, like I just said, man, I really, I do appreciate your comment, right? Tried to pick me as a Bama fan up after this loss. I do very much will appreciate that, Headless. But this also, to your point, Headless, hints at what I was just talking about. I'm as objective as I can be, because before I was just doing Bama content, I was covering all college football, right? So in order to do that effectively and gain trust from other fans, I would always, whenever I was formulating a talking point or an argument, the first thing I would do is argue it against it to show both sides of the coin. And when I'm looking at this really objectively, for Nick Saban to have retired 2 years ago, for all of those guys to enter the portal, for Alabama to then 2 years later be in a conference championship game, being the number 1 seed in the SEC, I can't say I'm just like sitting here super heartbroken, right? I'm not just sitting here super heartbroken. Bama just closed on, depending on where you look, if you look at 24/7, the number 2 recruiting class in the nation. If you look at On3, it's still, I think, I haven't checked it. Last time I checked, it was still top 10. Then they got the 4-star offensive tackle flipping from LSU. Could be top 5 now. So no matter what you look, Alabama has one of the best recruiting classes in the nation coming in, and it's one of the smaller ones in the top 10. The average player rank, when I did check on3, was number 2 or 3 in all of college football. So it's a smaller class, but it is a very good class. 4 or 5 stars. Fantastic recruiting class for Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. If you would have told me Saban retires, Alabama is the number 1 team year 2 in the SEC championship game. They don't win the SEC championship game, but they just brought in a top 5, we'll say, recruiting class in the nation. I'd be like, cool. That's unfortunate you lost the SEC championship game, but it could be a lot worse year 2 after the GOAT retires. NIL has changed everything. NIL has changed everything, Conan. In a way, it's been equalized. In a way, it hasn't. But Mark, I appreciate the humor, Mark. I really do. Mark, OU fan, great friend of the channel, says, "Come on, Ty, we can't complete a forward pass. We won't be making an SEC championship game anytime soon." I think your offense is going to be just fine. They just need to figure it out. Defense is phenomenal at OU. Defense is fantastic. Maybe we can watch a real football game with OU and Indiana. That would be interesting. I'm interested to see what happens. I mean, there's no doubt this was not good. I think that the most jarring part of that is at the end of this, you're not going to win in the SEC if you can't run the football. And if you are winning, despite not being able to run the football well, you have some component of your team that is just phenomenal, right? Like Oklahoma really has kind of figured out the running game the back half of the season, for instance, but they don't have like a top 5 run attack in college football. But their defense is phenomenal, right? Defense is phenomenal. Running backs have come on. But if you're Alabama and you only rush for 16 attempts, like, I don't know what to do with that. I have no idea what to do with that. I mean, you have 16 attempts rushing the football in an SEC championship game. Georgia, on the other side, had 41 attempts for 141 yards, average 3.4. So it's not like that, they just ran all over Alabama. They ran it 41 times. They committed to the run. Good for them. But Bama rushing 16 carries for -3 yards at the end of this game, once you account for sack yardage, that's terrible. Like, you're not going to win games like that. 3 sacks in this game. Bama gave up 3 sacks. Bama gave up 4 tackles for losses. You're not going to win if you cannot run the football, if you cannot give the defense something else to think about. You're just not. That's just, yeah. You're just not going to have a good time. Georgia dominated the time of possession. Absolutely dominated the time of possession. Georgia won 3rd down. Georgia won 4th down. I mean, it's just, that's it. What about the long developing pass routes? I have no idea. I can't answer that one for you because I don't really understand it either. especially when you can't hit anything deep. And I've said this so many times. When I end up watching the all 22, it just kills me sometimes how there are guys that do break open. The Kylan 1998 over on Bleacher Report says Bama should drop to 12 but still be in. They beat Georgia in a head-to-head game at their home, and like you said, they're number 9. Texas A&M dropped 4 spots once they lost, but didn't play an extra game and also had a weaker strength of schedule. Bama should be in. Yeah, man. To me, it's not about the loss. Because if Alabama loses this game, it's a competitive game, it's a 7-point loss, or even if it's a 10-point loss, but it was still a very competitive game, kind of a nail biter, right? Georgia has the blocked punt. Georgia capitalizes on the interception. Bama comes back, but it's a 10-point loss. Good game. This isn't a conversation. Like, if it's a competitive game, preferably a 1-score loss, this isn't a conversation. Like, we're not sitting here even questioning what the committee would do. It's not even a question. That wasn't the case, though. I think they will get in, but I don't know if they will get in. We'll see. Hey, Anthony, hope you're doing well, man. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, I just... Bama's offense continues to just sputter. It's been this way since about October. Ty Simpson at the end of this game, 19 of 39, 212 yards, averaged 5.4 yards per attempt. And that's when teams, as much as it's just like baffling that Ty Simpson has had some struggles the past few weeks, I really go back to what I've been talking about. Teams are just sitting in 2 high safety shells, keeping everything in front of them, and they'll heat him up, but they're not sitting out of their 2 high safeties. They're completely daring Alabama to run the ball, and Alabama hasn't been able to. Headless Ace says Indiana's quarterback already knocked out of the game on the first play. Really, Headless. That's not good. Prayers to him. Hopefully he's okay. I don't want to see anybody get injured, especially not teams like, for Alabama, right? Zabian Brown goes down in this game. Having an unbelievable back half of the season, that's just heartbreaking, because even if Alabama makes the playoffs, like you need him healthy. I don't want any injuries. God forbid any injuries ever, but especially in this situation. Especially in this situation. Sooner in Texas, if Bama doesn't get in because they play the championship game, Sankey will blow up. Yes, Sankey will do something crazy. He will do something crazy. Oh, he's back now? Okay, good. Good. Ordinary average saying he's fine. Yeah, I don't have the game pulled up right now. I'm sulking a little bit at the moment. I'm taking my 15-minute hiatus from college football before I dive back in. But good to hear that he's fine. I don't want to hear about... I don't want any injuries for guys who are about to be competing in the playoffs. Listen, I'm an Alabama fan, but I'm a college football fan. I want good football all the way around. So I want teams at their best in the playoffs. I want the best teams in the playoffs when they're at their best. And I didn't want to move past 4 teams. I did not. Yeah, listen, anybody... What are your thoughts on... Let me check it out, Anthony. A friend asked you what's wrong with the running game. To me, Anthony, it's just that the offensive line for Alabama right now, and I've talked about this quite a bit, so for those of you that have heard this, I apologize, but the offensive line for Alabama right now is kind of an amalgamation of styles. It's tough for them because the coaches are kind of having to adjust to what the offensive line, like the personnel you have, and it's good personnel. But this is why we always talk about. This is why I've said when I've made content, right? And I've talked about this for multiple teams. I've made content talking about a Florida State recruit, Florida recruit, Oklahoma, Texas, Bama, Colorado, you name it. But I have made content talking about 3 stars. And I've said in videos for all of those teams, whenever people are, I already know, because I already know in the comments, people are going to be like, oh, you're hyping up a 3-star. And I always say in the video, kind of preempting those comments, that it matters more if the guy you're recruiting fits the scheme your coaches are running than does the star ranking. You will find diamond 3-star players. Do they fit your scheme? You can have a very talented roster. Alabama has a very talented roster, but does the personnel completely fit the scheme? No, not yet. They're trying to make it work, but Anthony, I think that's a big thing right now. Is you have what Alabama can do versus what Alabama wants to do, and you're trying to just kind of mold this offense as you go. That's not a recipe you want to be in. And Anthony, any Alabama fan that says we want Kalen DeBoer gone and we want Dabo Swinney in here, I would have a real bone to pick with them. Bama is, I know that there are a lot of Bama fans upset at Kalen DeBoer. Fine. Kalen DeBoer is not, I don't know. I don't think that Bama fans are spoiled. Blue blood fans are spoiled. That's why it's so fun interacting with blue blood fans, because they're spoiled. And they'll always say like, oh, well, this is where the program is. These are the expectations. And I'm like, you're right. It's great to have those expectations. That's amazing. But let's also look at the big picture here. We saw this with Ohio State fans before last year with Ryan Day. Ryan Day was winning all these games, but he couldn't beat Michigan. And Ohio State fans were like, hey, if he loses to Michigan again, he's gone. They lose to Michigan the last time, and then they end up going on that run. So I am certainly not one of those Alabama fans that's like, hey, DeBoer needs to go. DeBoer does not need to go. They are recruiting at an unbelievably elite level right now. I don't think anybody out there thought 2 years post Saban, Alabama would still be bringing in top 5 classes. They just need the time. 2 years post Saban, Alabama just played for an SEC championship game as the number 1 seed. Did it go well? No. But this is what I mean when I say we have to also be objective and realistic and look at this and say, it could be a lot worse whenever the GOAT retires and 2 years later you sign a top 5 recruiting class and you played for a conference championship in the SEC. It could be a lot worse. It could be so much worse. But we're spoiled because Saban did what Saban did. It was unbelievable. It was unheard of. So Bama fans are spoiled, naturally so. But to me, that doesn't diminish from the fact that we also need to take a step back and really be objective. It could be so much worse, and it is not that bad. I don't even think it's bad. It's not a bad situation to be in. You just got to adjust. And that's what it is, at least in my view. Headless A says, respectfully, from an outsider's view, Bama's biggest issues are the poor O-line play and the defense being hit and miss, although they're generally good. They're just not suffocating. My 2 cents worth. So I agree with you more on the first one, Headless. I think Alabama's defense has been anything but the issue. But here's where I think that you're onto it, right? Whenever you say that they're not suffocating, Bama's defense isn't suffocating. That's not my argument at all. And that's why I understand why you would have that take, even though I don't necessarily subscribe to that same thought process. I can understand why, if you watch Bama, you would have it. Bama's defense has a tendency to give up a few big plays a game and then really kind of lock in and bend but don't break. That's kind of been the Bama defense. Outside of a handful of plays a game, they've been really, really good. But the offensive line kind of not being where it needs to be, that I 100% agree with. And no running game. Like, that's the biggest issue to me right now for Alabama, is you cannot run the football. East Coast over on Bleacher Report says, even when we were winning or on our winning streak this season, I thought the offense always struggled in second half of games they have. And that was the scary part coming out of half, because Georgia has notoriously been really good in the second half this year. Tough to put away. And yeah. Anthony over on YouTube asks, Ty, do you think that the reason why Simpson is struggling adjusting to two high safeties is because of his height? Because I don't believe he's 6'2", like they're saying. I think he's 5'11". I think more than the height, Anthony, it's just simply that teams know what he's good at. He's good at the intermediate, but it's very easy to take away what you're good at when you're not even good at the entire passing game. You're good at half the passing game. That headless, that I do agree with. Like, if Bama's defense is going to get beat death by 1,000 cuts, I think is an astute way to put it. I really do think, headless, that if you had an offense that was just consistent, if Alabama had an average running game, I don't think that we would even be having the conversation, because to me, whenever you're a pass offense and you're not exactly an explosive pass offense, you're just kind of that intermediate, we're going to work you down the field, control the clock. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, headless. I actually don't know if you were in here, but it's very interesting that most teams that are pass aren't also control teams. Alabama is a control offense while not being able to run the football. That's really kind of strange when you think about it, that they're so pass dominant, but they also want to win the time of possession battle. That's kind of fascinating, at least in my opinion. That's kind of a fascinating crossroads to be at. Yeah. No running game. Like, that to me is the most perplexing. It's just not there. It is just not there. And listen, I want Alabama to make the playoffs. Obviously, I'm an Alabama fan. But then the question you have to ask is, like, is this going to get fixed by the playoffs? There's been very real issues that we've discussed here several times. And even though I think that, like we've talked about, Sankey and them are at a really interesting position. Marquez Boy 82 says this team is not disciplined on either side of the ball. The coaching is subpar. Kalen has no clue on what it takes in the SEC. I care nothing about him winning every other place he's been. Those other conferences are not as physical. I just kind of disagree with that, Marquez. One, the defense is, I wouldn't say the defensive coaching is subpar. I think that right now, Bama, one, Mo Linguist coaching the cornerbacks has been excellent. Absolutely excellent. For Alabama last season to have a top 10 pass in terms of efficiency, when you looked at advanced metrics and you looked at this pass defense for Alabama, that secondary, an area that Nick Saban even had concern about, given the youth, given all the transfers, given the turnover, for them to be top 10 in passing defense efficiency last season and probably top 10 this year as well, I don't think that the coaching is subpar. And I think Kalen DeBoer obviously isn't the problem you say he is, or Alabama wouldn't have been in the SEC championship game. That's just my take on it. Yeah, Jeffrey, the offense hasn't been carrying their weight. That's 100% true. Anthony says, this is why I fear he's going to struggle in the NFL. Look at what's happening with both Bryce and Tua and force him to throw outside the numbers. Yeah. We give up too many yards on the ground and in the air. I just don't really know that that's the case. Marquez, I just don't think that's true. When we look at this game, Gunnar Stockton threw for 156 yards on 26 attempts. Georgia ran for 141 yards. That I grant you, 41 times, averaging 3.4 yards per carry. So it's not exactly like the defense was like, oh man, they gave up so much. They really didn't. The offense did them no favors. If the offense pulls their weight, you're not in the position that you are. Marquez, what I think it is very, very, very simple. If your offense continues to 3 and out, your defense statistically has more of an opportunity to get scored on, to have the other team gain yards. That's just statistics. If the defense is out there for, let's see, what was the time of possession breakdown? If the defense is out there for 36 minutes of the football game, statistically speaking, it's more likely than not that they're going to have the team gain yards. The offense has got to alleviate pressure from the defense. The defense is doing everything they can. And I think that it's very simple, Marquez, and I've talked about this several times. The film guy over on YouTube, he also made a great breakdown of this where he really dove into the All-22 film. Brooks Austin, if you want to check out this video, it's really quite good, where he really dove into this, and he was talking about one of the things that I've talked about, in that Bama has a lot of talent on this team. I will never shy away from that. But on offense right now, you're extremely half-dimensional because you don't have a deep passing game. You absolutely can't run the football. You want your offensive line to pin and pull, but the offensive line you inherited was the total opposite of a pin and pull offensive line. Like the total opposite of a pin and pull offensive line. So you're now half-dimensional, and it's because you still are trying to match the personnel to a scheme. And you're really trying to do the exact opposite. You're trying to formulate a scheme to match the personnel. That to me is what it is. Marquez says, family, we haven't looked like Alabama this season or last season. But Marquez, while I absolutely hear you, do we really want to unpack Saban's last year? Like Alabama last year was closer to Saban's last year than anybody wants to admit. How many of those games Saban's last year did Alabama just squeak out? Hell, they needed the 4th and 31 in Auburn to just squeak out a win there. So that's why whenever people are like, oh, DeBoer's the issue, I'm sitting here like, I love Saban. I have books behind me right there on Saban. I've studied the dude. I've studied his defense. Any book I can read on him, I do, because I think he's a fascinating human being. But Alabama struggled his last year mightily. Mightily. Almost lost to USF. almost lost to Auburn, squeaked out several games. I think the reason why I disagree, Marquez, is if that was Saban's last year, where Alabama was winning close games, and then you have that much talent leave the team. Trey Amos leaves the team. Caleb Downs leaves the team. You lose 30 guys to the portal. And 2 years later, after the greatest coach of all time leaves, you have all those guys hit the portal. Your new coaching staff signs a top 5 recruiting class, and you get to play in an SEC championship game. That's where I just don't believe in the thing where it's like, DeBoer is the issue. So that's where I disagree, Marcus. Nicholas says, what's the most irritating thing to watch with this team is the softness, especially along the line of scrimmage. No fire or aggression from coaches or players. We only came into one game, this with a killer, and that's when we showed up in Athens. Yeah. Yeah. I also, guys, I think that this is just very easy. There's only so much you can do whenever you have real limitations as a coach. And Alabama's offense has real limitations. I really do think it's that simple. Alabama's offense has real limitations. They can't run the ball. They can't hit deep shots. Teams are able to sit in too high safety. They're not worried about getting beat deep. They take care of everything in front of them. Anthony says, I like Simpson. I don't know if he truly fits the scheme. He does and doesn't. DeBoer and them want to test teams vertically. They want to be explosive. And unfortunately, that's one area that Ty Simpson just hasn't been good at this season. Is testing teams vertically. But that's something that needs to happen. Marquez says, I definitely agree with you on offense. Yeah, man, and listen, I'm not saying, Marquez, that like everything you're saying is like super illogical, and like I don't want you to think that I'm sitting here being like, no, bad take. Because I don't think that anything you're saying is illogical, but I also think as Alabama fans, let's be very honest here, Marquez, right? Like, let's meet each other halfway right here, right? Let's be very honest. Let's take this step back. We're very spoiled. We watched something incredible with Nick Saban. We watched domination that this sport that you rarely see. Right? We watch domination that you rarely see in football with Nick Saban. And you lose that in the transfer portal. I think I just look at it to where I'm like, is this where I want Alabama to be? Of course not. I'm disappointed that we didn't win the SEC championship game, but I also think that when Saban retired, I don't think there were a lot of fans from, say, Michigan, Ohio State, USC that would have said, oh, in 2 years, Bama will be in the SEC championship game, looking at the playoffs, signing top 5 classes. I don't think that many people out there would have even thought that's where Alabama would be. And yet that's where we are. So in no way, shape, or form, Marquez, am I trying to sit here and gaslight you and say like, oh, it's perfect? Because I agree with you. It is not perfect. But I think if we really take that step back, and maybe I'm not even saying that, hey, no, it's 100% certain that Kalen DeBoer is like infallible. He is the guy. Of course not, right? Like, it's still very early. Nobody is faultless, is what I'm trying to say. I just look at the situation and I'm like, it could be so much worse. And I think that we are very spoiled. And so you're still operating like a top program in college football. I'll take it. I will 100% take it as the staff is still building. Like, they are still building right now to what they want Alabama to be. Recruiting well. Losses happen. And I know this doesn't feel better, but it's also Kirby Smart. I know Kirby has an Alabama problem. I know that it's like a rivalry without being a rivalry. But yeah. JW says you have to remember they lost to a sorry Florida State. Come on. What are we talking about? We're talking about football. They also broke the SEC, or they tied the SEC record for most wins against ranked opponents whenever they were playing, whenever the opponents were ranked back to back to back. So yeah, you're not wrong, JW. They definitely lost to Florida State. Then they beat Georgia. Then they went on that run, lost to Oklahoma, who has a fantastic defense. But yeah, I don't really get the point. Marquez says, I think this team and staff are headed in the wrong direction. We'll see. I don't. I just think, like I've been saying, man, I think that they are supremely half-dimensional. I can't even say they're one-dimensional on offense. And I think that they're trying to do the best they can. I could be wrong on that, Marquez. And if I am wrong on that, like if next year I'm dead wrong on that, hold me accountable, man. Like I will eat crow. I will do whatever, I'll eat the crow. I'll admit I was wrong. But I'm still very confident about the future for Alabama. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's where I'm at. Nicholas says, if Ty is not the guy, why not go to Mack or Russell? Why go down, or just go down with a sinking ship with Ty? So, Nicholas, I think that once again, it just gets back to, even if you go with Austin Mack or Keelan Russell, you still can't run the ball. Like now you're having two guys in there who I think they're both very, very talented. I think they're both very talented quarterbacks. But you still have two guys who don't have a lot of playing time, who don't have a lot of experience, playing Kirby Smart. Like when we're talking about the top defensive minds in college football, Kirby's up there. And it's one thing to be like, okay, well, offensive coordinator versus defensive coordinator, right? That's a chess match. But what also about the Jimmies and the Joes on the field? You're talking about a Kirby Smart defense that then would be going up against an inexperienced quarterback. And I know what you're thinking. Nick Saban did it. He pulled the quarterback, Jalen Hurts to Tua. You also had more of a running game. You also had the ability to alleviate pressure off of Tua. And Tua did something special. Like, we also have to realize what a special moment that is. You know what I mean? Like, because I don't disagree with you. Nick Saban did it with Tua, but that's also like a Disney movie waiting to happen. That was just an unbelievable situation. My fear, Nick, is that if you pull Ty Simpson, you put in these new guys who don't have a bunch of experience. They're playing a Kirby Smart defense that's really improved over the last few weeks, and you still don't have a running game. So it's not even like the defense has to worry about that. They're going to look at the situation and say, bet, ball up top, we're still going to be in a too high safety shell, and you don't have a bunch of reps. So even if we tweak some things and change some things, but still stay very pass defense forward, it's going to, would it be better? I don't know. But that's kind of why I think they didn't, is because even if you did make that move, you still have no running game to take pressure off. Mr. Goat says season's over. We're not making the playoffs. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Is it because he's Polynesian, Mark? And then he did it in reverse with Hurts, but the run was there. Yeah, 100%. 100%, Ebony. Good to see you, by the way, Ebony, over on YouTube. Good to see you. Yeah, I just think that's really as simple as it is. Yeah, you're you're going to have a very hard time winning football games if you are this one-dimensional on offense. Georgia got the special teams win, Georgia got the interception, and you can't threaten them deep, you can't run the ball. They're keying into what you want to do. It sucks, but that's where Alabama's at right now. So what happens moving forward? Do they make the playoffs? This is where we're going to end it. I've talked about this, so this isn't going to be long. I have no idea. I don't have the answer for you on that. I think that if Alabama would have lost this game by 3, 7, even 10 points, but it been a very competitive game, right? Keep the special teams play, keep the interception. Georgia wins by 10, but Alabama really rallied back, and we had ourselves a football game. We're not even having a conversation. We're not even having a conversation. It's going to be fascinating to see if they punish a team who would have been a lock for the playoff had they not gone to a championship game. So yeah, watching Kalen on the sideline every game makes me want to choke him out. He shows no passion at all. He's just a calm dude, man. He reminds me kind of Bryce, right? Where Bryce was just always so even keeled. And they're just calm. Just very even keeled people. They just stay calm. Yeah. So we'll see tomorrow what happens. We'll talk again on Monday. We'll go into depth about this, about what Alabama, if they make it, if they don't make it. We'll address that on Monday. You all go and enjoy. Chuck on YouTube says, you guys also had several people out, right? Yeah, Chuck, we were pretty injured. I mean, that's no excuse. So is Georgia. But Bama was pretty injured. The first string running back was out. Kevin Riley, another running back that they used, was out. LT Overton was out. Kelby Collins was out. Zabian Brown got hurt during the game. And yeah, a lot of people were out, but that's football. That's football. So y'all go enjoy the games. We'll talk about Monday. We'll talk about the playoffs and everything on Monday. Roll Tide as always. Still great to be an Alabama fan. I'm going to end it with this because even though we may disagree on where Alabama is, I do think as Alabama fans, we do need to take that step back and appreciate where the program is from the standpoint of you just got a top recruiting class. And guys, if you haven't, go check out this Alabama recruiting class. It's special. Jariah Edwards is what they look like, right? Like he is going to be so good. Jordan Edmonds is going to be so good. This is a really good Alabama recruiting class. You just competed for an SEC championship game. It didn't go the way we wanted, but roll tide, man. Like season didn't go the way we wanted it, even if this is the last game. But you played for an SEC championship game year 2 after Saban retired. Great recruiting class. If that's as bad as it is, well, I think, and Marquez, I think most of them have signed their letter of intent. Now, obviously, there are ways to get out of that, but I think they're locked in. I think they're locked in. This has been a very good group that Alabama has been after. Fantastic. So, at least I hope they're locked in. God forbid. Let's all go knock on some wood right now. But it could be a lot worse for Alabama to still be in this position. I think that I'm personally very grateful because you've seen teams not lose coaches that aren't Nick Saban's level. Delmar said, feel that ass whooping, Bama Nation. Go Dogs. Hey, good win. Good win, Delmar. There's no excuses over here. Georgia played a great game. Won an SEC championship. Congratulations to the Dogs. No excuses over here. Congratulations to the Dogs. Y'all earned the win. You earned your right to talk. Not going to hear anything from me, man. Other than congratulations, good win. That's it. But yeah, I'm still very thankful. Y'all go enjoy the college football games. Go enjoy this Big Ten championship game. Have a safe weekend. I'll see you on Monday. And as always, roll Tide.